Hello, this is Doug Robinson with Def Edit Software LLC, and in this video we're going to be playing around a little bit with the orchestration pack for Microsoft Active Directory. I went and installed this on my server yesterday because I wanted to start working with Active Directory, and you'll probably see us post a couple of videos in the near future in regards to things you can do with Cherwell and Active Directory. And before I started working with it, I remembered there's an orchestration pack for this, and probably 10 out of the 10 scripts that I want to run that involve Active Directory have been developed by this map. So I'm going to get this map installed just so I have it there as a starting point, because I'm sure anything that I need is already there and I can just modify one steps that are already there. The very first one step I took a look at when I installed this map was the customer add account to group one step, because I thought, hey, that's pretty interesting. I know I've worked on something like that in the past, and the very first thought in my mind was, I wonder how they do that without having the actual Active Directory groups in the system. Because they would have to either prompt you for the group, they'd have to maybe query the list of groups in real time somehow, maybe there's an API that I'm not aware of. That's an interesting one step to have. And I haven't actually installed the AD Orchestration Pack before because I haven't yet had a need for it. I have a bad habit of just manually building things out myself. So I took a look at it, and something that I noticed is I think most of the one steps that are included in this map are intended to be used by your technicians, and so they execute on your technicians' machines. So this uses a Powershell script, so you'd have to have running scripts enabled, unless I actually haven't checked whether it uses the execution policy bypass flag, but you might have to have running scripts enabled to use these, and you also would probably have to have the Active Directory commandlets installed on that machine, which isn't impossible. It's not difficult at all to get those set up. But what I would like to do, and what we're going to be covering a little bit in this video, is I'd like to actually have this run from the server. And the reason for that is I like to automate workflows, and I like to be able to troubleshoot when things break. And it's a little bit harder for me to do that and for me to control when something's going to work a certain way when it's done on the client's side of things or on the technician side of things. So I'm going to offload the work for one of these one steps onto the server. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. Very simply, we're just going to create a supporting business object that holds the data that's going to get sent to this one step here. That is not the original customer add account to group one step, but the none association master add account to group, because that one's under the none association, and I think they put it there so that you could use it across many different business objects, which is actually really smart. I've looked a little bit at this map, and everything I see just looks more and more clever, so I really like the map itself. It's a great starting point if you're going to be working with Active Directory. But what I'm going to do is all of the data that gets passed over to this map, for example, we have a customer SAM account name and then the group that it's going to be getting passed into in a variable right here. We're just going to create a supporting object with this information, and then we're going to create an automation process that fills in this stored value with the information off of that supporting object. That way the server can execute it, has all the information it needs, and from the client or technician side of things, all that they need to see that's going to happen is it creates that record and it says, great, we're going to execute this, have them wait about 60 seconds. You could say have them wait 60 seconds or 15 minutes for it to replicate, yada, 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 because the group memberships might not be updated on their end in real time anyways. So what this does is it enables you, let's say your technician is on the phone with someone, it enables you to get them off the phone a little bit faster than if they had to wait for a script to finish and check something else. Now, adding a user to an AD group is a really poor example of that because it doesn't take very long at all. But if you had 30 users or 40 users or 50 users, you can also go and create a workflow that automates that as well. And it becomes more of a hands-off approach if you can have this working on the server in a situation where it works consistently on an automated basis. And then from there, your administrator can troubleshoot when it goes wrong, and you can have, maybe your PowerShell script records errors into a supporting business object, yada, yada, yada. All of that's not really relevant. What we're going to go over is how we would actually build that if we wanted to. And the very simple answer for that is say we have a SAM account name and a group prompt. We're going to create a child business object. So I'm going to go to the new object item that's already highlighted, and I'm going to click new business object. I just realized I've been talking for 5 minutes before actually getting to this, so sorry for that. And we're going to name this Active Directory Group Membership. I'm just going to call it a membership request. Can't think of a better name for it. So this is going to be a supporting object. Doesn't necessarily have to be in table management, but it will use one-steps. Won't have searches or queues. Probably not expressions, because this one's going to be pretty simple. And we didn't need ownership information on it either, so I'm going to take those off. I really actually kind of wish for supporting and lookup objects. I wish I could just have these default to not be checked. But that's a problem for a different day. Alright, so the fields that we need are customer SAM account name. And this one, I don't know, I'm just going to leave this at 50. I don't think there's ever a SAM account name that's more than about 50 characters, but just in case. And we're going to include the customer name and the customer ID. Now, customer name and ID aren't necessarily required for this. I'm always going to include them if I do something like this, because later on, if I want to add to this one step, if I'm populating customer ID, I can at least use a go to record action to jump to that customer record if I need to do other things. And what I've learned in my many years of building one-steps and workflows in Cherwell is it's never done the first time you do it. You're always going to go back and add something to it later. So I'm going to include this customer ID value so that I don't need it later on. So next, we're going to populate a form here, and I don't really care that much about the form because this is, for the most part, if we were building this out, I'd be having this be an automated process where like maybe someone's submitting a request that says, I need to add this customer to this group under a specifics form for an incident or service request. And then the specific, once approved, maybe it goes and creates this under the customer record. This record isn't going to be seen that often by the technicians. They're going to look at either directly the customer record or an incident, and then this will get created in the background, and an automation process will run against this in the background. And it reminds me that I need one or two other fields, and those are going to be automation process scheduled, which is a logical, and automation process completed. Now that's a pretty generic name, but basically what I want that to record is that this is waiting for the automation process to run and add them to the AD group, and then also that it completed successfully. And I'm going to add successfully to the name because that's an important note. Now the reason for that is automation process scheduled is going to get saved with a default value of checked. When our automation process runs, we're going to have it set to flag automation process scheduled to false because it's finally been executed. And then we're going to set this at the very end of our one step, assuming there's been no errors. Or, if we wanted to check whether the user was actually a member of the group. We're not going to cover, caching errors in this video, but generally I include those two fields so that I can put some kind of visual on the grid saying, hey, this completed successfully, hey, this is pending, and we'll show you how we normally do that. So if, I need an advanced query here, if automation process scheduled is equal to true, then we're going to use our pause or our pending image. I don't like that image. There we go. This one's nicer looking. And if, I need another advanced expression here, if automation process scheduled is not true, and automation process completed is not true, then it failed. In that case, it definitely failed. We're going to use error. And then if automation process completed is true, then it was successful and we can use apply 16. Basically what that means is we can show a row image of either a green check mark or a red exclamation mark or a pause icon. So if we look at these on a grid somewhere, we can see what the status is, and that becomes important if you start doing this for large groups of records at a time, so you can see what the processing status is. So now we have a child business object, and I forgot to add in the Active Directory group name. Now it's important to note here that we don't yet have the data in our system to validate from. So there's a table that's included in the Active Directory Orchestration Pack mApp, and it's a nice looking group. It's formatted very well. I don't see it in my list here, but it's labeled AD Orchestration Pack AD group. And there's a group name field on here, and we're going to validate off of that. I'm not going to enforce it. But there's no data in that group or in that table right now. There might be sample data. I haven't looked. Yeah, there's sample data in there, but it's not. The data is not coming in there at any point in time. It's all dated from August of 2015. I'm actually going to remove all of this right now, and then we're going to. I don't know if I want to publish this yet. I'm going to create a relationship from customer to our new supporting business object so that we can create this business object from a customer record, so we can go and test it out. Now, I'm not of the opinion that our technicians are going to be manually operating this relationship. I'm of the opinion that we're going to be automating this from somewhere else, and I don't really want them seeing this relationship if they start searching with related clauses and other things. It's not going to be that relevant to other people, so I'm just going to append it with sys so it shows up at the bottom of our list of relationships. Alright, this owns many possible Active Directory group membership request records. And it links using a parent. Well, actually, I guess it links using a customer ID value, doesn't it? That makes sense, right? I think it does. We're going to load immediately just in case we need this somewhere else and it doesn't load immediately. Great, relationships built. We're going to go into the form arrangement editor and we're going to drag and drop that onto our customer so that later we can test it out manually. This is how we get shorter YouTube videos. And in the properties, actually I don't think I have, well, I'm just going to turn off these two options. I don't like the other two views, so I just don't like seeing them. Fun note, our apply or update blueprint checkbox here wasn't actually available after I changed that view for that tab. So if you were watching very closely, I opened the properties dialog and I clicked OK, and it brought that back up. That's a handy little trick that I've learned in a couple of areas of Sharewell. If you're working on a form and you make a change to a label and it doesn't actually give you that update blueprint option, what I've noticed is if you go into the properties and you click OK and you click somewhere, you can update the blueprint with that item again. I don't know if that's relevant to you, but for me, every once in a while, I don't get the option to apply my changes, the last change that I made, and I end up with a very slight label change that doesn't get published. I think that's only on version 8 though. I haven't seen it, well, this isn't version 8, so I'm wrong. It's only on a couple of versions. I know this got fixed at some point. But if you run into that problem, there's a handy workaround for that. So now that we have our relationship, I'm going to publish this. Just so that I didn't miss anything. You know, it's good to scan our stuff incrementally. Great. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to populate Well, actually, no. The next thing I want to do is actually build our automation process for this supporting object. So we're going to create an automation process, and it is going to emulate the one step that runs against our customer internal record when we want to manually add them to a group. To do that, we're going to create an automation process, and this is going to go off, I'm going to say, right when that record gets created, because it should always have the data on it when it gets created. I can't actually see what my trigger is. There we go. I know it starts off as created. It was just very funny to me for a second that I couldn't see it. Hey, at least I can resize this and find it. Alright, so we don't need any limitations on this. We're going to run a one step right after I name this. You'll see me use that fancy word there to describe any supporting object that holds information like this. I don't know, I just like using it. Great, so we're going to create a one step, and I'm going to leave this in global in case I need to modify it later. If this were a real production system, I'd just throw it into the blueprint folder because, actually, fun fact, I heard that blueprint scoped items get included in your global definitions catalog, whereas global scoped items may or may not. I don't know. I think it depends on version. I heard that once, and I thought it was interesting. I've been throwing a lot more stuff into the blueprint folder since, just in case. Alright, so we're going to create a one step that says add AD group member. And what this is going to do is it's going to update a stored variable or stored value or variable, sorry, other way around. And we're going to go into the Orchestration Packs folder in our stored value manager, and we are going to find, I want to say it's OP Active Directory parameter. That's the one that makes the most sense here. The description doesn't tell me exactly what I need to know, but I'll double check. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pass the customer SAM account name, and they had a prompt for the AD group that was going to get passed. Since we have a supporting object here that stores the AD group name, we don't need a prompt. If this were automated, let's say there's one step that always gets used, or there's a workflow that always sends it to one group, there's no prompt, it just happens. So we're just going to have this value populated, it's going to pass to this one step, it's great. Here we're going to name this set parameters for one step, and then we're going to run another one step to actually execute the master add AD group member one step. I am in the wrong place. Oh, I'm in the global folder, that's why. Master add account to group. And what this does, if we want to look at it again, this is our master one step. What this does is it creates a PowerShell script. Now, I really like the way they formatted this PowerShell script, I just want to say, because they used parameters in the PowerShell script, so they don't have to actually embed the tokens for the group name, the output file, the username into the PowerShell script, which I absolutely love, because every once in a while I'll put a token like for a file name or something in here, and at some point it breaks. I'll do something and it'll break, and I'll have to go back into my PowerShell scripts and replace it. And they use multiple PowerShell scripts, and they just put a parameter in each of them so that they only have to update the actual parameters once. You know, they do it in the execute script action here. I'm very used to looking in my PowerShell scripts to find my tokens. They were smart enough in this map to go ahead and just put them in here as parameters, which is great. So you've got here parameter options under command line arguments, and then file here, and then your Active Directory parameter and the output file. Anyways, so that's our stored value that we just updated with the SAM account name and the group name. And then it updates that PowerShell script. It puts the result details into a stored value, which I suppose is quite interesting. because then you can get the results out of this one step. This is a pretty standard action. If you've got a one step in your non-association and you want to use it across multiple different business objects, generally what you do is you create a stored value to pass information to that one step. You run the one step pulling data out of the stored value, and you post the results back into a stored value so that your other action can find them after the one step's complete. So this is pretty standard. And then if there's an error, I suppose that result is the result code of our PowerShell script. Oh no, there's a separate details for the result from the output file contents, and then this is checking the PowerShell script result code to see if there was an error or not, which is great. And then afterwards it says the user was added to group, run their get account info and list group members actions to confirm, and then our one step's over. That's great. These pop-ups won't run if we're running against the server, which is perfectly fine. And that's all we really need to do to automate this from our supporting business object. We send the information into that stored value and we execute it, and that's pretty much it. And what I had mentioned I wanted to do as well is right when this executes, we're going to clear out the fact that this was scheduled, and we're going to save it. And then at the end, once it's done, if it runs without an error, we are going to mark this completed action as true. And I'm not going to add in any kind of error catching stuff because this video is already going to be pretty long. But that's our automation process. The next action we're going to take here is we're going to pull in data for our Active Directory groups. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to map this to Active Directory. Now, I have an Active Directory system set up on this environment. We have an Active Directory domain of DefEdit Software LLC. I actually went through and built that yesterday as I moved all of my Cherwell databases to a very standard and formalized virtual machine. Prior to that, I had everything on a machine that was being used for something else. So we're going to import this from Active Directory, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to import items from our group LDAP object. And I'm going to have a filter on our group using a filter string. Now I just went out and Googled the filter string that I needed, which is I want to pull in all security groups. That's this item right here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, and I've done this at least once before, I believe I can just paste this in here. And then we're going to pull in name. At the very least, I want the group name. And then I think system LDAP path gets populated automatically. So with this, if I click OK, we should be able to publish our blueprint and import our Active Directory groups into our Cherwell system. So to test this out, I'm going to import from Active Directory. And here's our directory service here. Here's our one item that's tied to Active Directory. And our key is going to be the group name. And we're just going to import everything that we can find in that external service. Here's the filter we're going to use. And hey, we have 51 groups that were imported. So if I reload definitions, because we did go and modify some things, if I reload definitions and go and find that table in table management, I should be able to find some Active Directory groups. And here we are. So here's the list of groups that we have in Active Directory. And what I'm going to do to test this out is I'm going to pop open Active Directory and we're going to create a new group just to test. Group name is going to be Cherwell Test Group. I don't think we need an email or anything like that. This can be a security group. I'm not going to do anything with it, so we're just going to click OK. And then we're going to create a new, I'm going to create a new user. And we're going to create a user for one of our customers. So I think there's a John Allard or someone else in here that we can use. We're going to use Amy Lynch. So Amy Lynch is going to become a user in our Active Directory environment here, and we're going to move them into a specific Active Directory group to test out our one-steps here. All right, so Amy Lynch, we're going to copy her name. We're going to go back into our Create User dialog here. Her name's going to be Amy Lynch, and her SAM account name. That's not this network ID field, is it? No. There should be a SAM account name field somewhere on this form. There it is. It's going to be A Lynch. And I think that's all that we really need here. We're going to create a password. I had to come up with a password on the spot. That was funny. And then we're going to save this user. So now that we have this user, we are going to create a request for them to be added to an Active Directory group. Before I do that, I'm gonna update our Active Directory group list so that it actually includes our Sharewell test group that we just created. Great. Now we have 52 groups in Sharewell. And I forgot to put our group name on this little form here. You notice how I said we never just build something once. There's always there's a little bit of trial and error, and there's always something you end up going back to do. I was, of course, talking about using a customer ID value for something, but we're going to update our form wizard, which is good because now we'll have those checkboxes there and we'll actually see them if we're looking at the form. And the reason that is good, by the way, is because if you need to rerun something like this, you can just, well, I guess you can't update the checkboxes. I was going to say you could just recheck those boxes if you had the automation process tied just to those checkboxes being set. Right now, I've set it up to where it's just on creation. But that's not that important because this is a test environment or a dev environment. I haven't labeled this environment test or dev, but that's fine. At some point, I'm going to have to check why it's taking so long to open this customer record. But for now, we are going to, and I didn't populate this data, and I probably should have. So this customer SAM account name, which is fine, by the way. If you were, customer ID is definitely getting set because it's marked as the key for this relationship. If you were populating this child record from this relationship, you would probably be doing so with an automated action, which would just fill this data in automatically, but I really should have gone through and made those auto-populated values. Anyways, we're going to add this user to the Sharewell test group. And you'll notice what I was saying with the row images, it's scheduled, hasn't been completed yet. That is a pending image right there. If I refresh this record at some point, once it's executed, that should get moved into a little apply check mark or something like that, so we know that it's not still pending. So now that that is done, what we've seen here is a Windows PowerShell credential request, which is pretty interesting. I'm going to type in my credentials and see if this works. So the interesting thing here is that we have our automation process running. And clearly there was an error. So something that must have happened here and we're going to go to that record and see what that error was. Something that I realized happened here is our automation process engine isn't running under an account that has access to run that command on PowerShell. So this failed because the one step ran for too long. And we're going to reload definitions because we published that blueprint. But essentially we also need to modify a couple of things. Since we're making changes to our Active Directory environment, we need our service to be running under an account that has credentials. So if I find my Cherwell services, I need them to sign in using an Active Directory account that has rights to make changes in Active Directory. So we have our automation process service here. And I need this to sign in using a special Active Directory account that I've created. Which is Cherwell LDAP. And we'll go ahead and type in its password here. Then we're going to restart this service. So we've restarted our service under our Cherwell LDAP service account, so it should have rights. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to modify that one step. Now, in my case, I don't actually need the original one step from this Active Directory orchestration pack, so I'm just going to modify the existing one. If this were your environment, you may want to create a copy of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the version of this script that doesn't require credentials. Or we're just not going to include the credential in the script that's run. So this guy right here actually determines whether or not we're going to use credentials via a prompt. I'm going to set that to no prompt because I'm not going to be entering Active Directory credentials into a prompt no matter what. It's nice that they include that option. I'm not going to be using it. So if this condition is not equal to true, and the condition being stored value equals 1, if this is false, it jumps to this action. Just in case that doesn't work, I'm just going to remove the credential item from here, and it should just work. So now we've done a couple of things. We fixed a random error that was caused by me migrating my database yesterday, and we've fixed a potential issue with our PowerShell script not being able to run because it didn't have the rights using our automation process engine's user account. So now if we rerun our one step here, or if we rerun our automation process by creating another entry under that customer record, here's Amy Lynch, and I'm just going to create a new one of these, and I'm going to copy the SAM account name and the customer name. It really doesn't matter if we have the customer name on this record or the customer ID for that matter. We could have just had a parent ID field. All that matters is that we have the customer SAM account name and the group that we want to add this user to. And before I save this, just in case our PowerShell script actually ran, I'm going to double check the group and see if anyone's been made a member of it. They have. So we ran our action against, I think, the local system account on our environment. So it may have actually ran and just not exited properly. Or I think the one-step error was that it ran for too long. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save this record and we're going to see if it runs again successfully. And the great thing now is, since I've fixed my external connection to this database, you can actually see sorry, you can actually see that it's refreshing this record much faster. It's fantastic. Ta-da! So our one-step finished executing. You may have noticed it actually opened up a PowerShell script twice, but it went and executed and it added them to that group, and then it finished, and at the end of our one-step process, it updated this business object with a automation process completed action, which is our cheating little way of marking that it finished so that we can actually see that there weren't any errors. So if we go down to that AD group processing item and we look at the current record automation processes, we see the one step ran successfully. Now I didn't record any troubleshooting information on this, so our information here is a little bland, but if I go into our group now, we can actually see that Amy Lynch is a member of the group. So at this point, if I wanted to automate adding a user to this specific group, all I would need to do is, and I'm going to do this on this video, don't you worry. All I would need to do is create a one-step that creates that record and says, add this person to this group. And we can have that one-step run either as a result of some automated workflow on the service request process, or maybe something on the portal, or anywhere else in the system. You know, maybe you're checking and seeing, does this person have rights to be in this group? Yes, let's add them. You know, whatever the case is, we can just add them by calling this one step at this point, and we don't have to worry about having many different processes that all run the same script. We just create the one child record and it adds them eventually. There is a delay with using the automation process, but that's fine. So all we need to do now to create or to add this person to the Cherwell test group is we create a child business object under the Active Directory group membership request business object. We set the group name, and this is what I was talking about earlier about being able to just pass parameters using a one-step. This is why I love supporting objects. When I create my one-step for this process, if I wanted to have an automated process or workflow that added these users to this group as like a specific type of workflow, when I'm creating my one-step for that, I get a validated list, and I can just select it out of that list, and it's great. SAM account name is equal to our customer's SAM account name field. There's nothing special about that. Customer ID gets set automatically as part of the relationship, and customer name will be full name. We're saving it after this action. So now all we have to do, I'm going to remove, well, we're going to run this on someone else. That requires us creating another user. But we're going to run this under, let's see, who's going to be the special person. We're going to create a user account for Henry Bryce. And then Henry is going to get added to our group, our Cherwell test group. So right away we have a user, or we have a request that's been entered under this supporting business object, and then Henry is going to get added to this group whenever the PowerShell script for this runs. And it looks like it ran pretty quick. He may already be in there. If I expand this out, now we have Amy Lynch and Henry Bryce as members of this group. So that's our video in a nutshell, in a 40-minute nutshell. We may have to edit this down. Essentially what we've done here is we took one of the actions from the AD Orchestration Pack and we automated it so that we can use it in different workflows, because again, most of the actions in the Orchestration Pack are included so that you can run them using your technicians. So on their machines, these PowerShell scripts will run. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be repurposing some of these in this example for automated workflows that will happen on the server. And this is a somewhat easy way to do that, even though it took a while to explain and actually demonstrate. Once you've done this, you can go and reuse it many times over the course of your Cherwell development cycle for different workflows and different types of requests. So that's all we have for this video. Keep subscribing and watching our YouTube channel, and you'll find other videos like this one and others. And if you have a suggestion for a video you'd like to see, feel free to comment under one of our videos or submit it under our website, which is defeditsoftware.com. Thanks.